Good morning, everyone. I am Nabamalika Joardar, your host today, and on behalf of the National Institute of Urban Affairs, I extend my warmest welcome to one and all present here at the launch of Leaders in Climate Change Management Program at NIUA, quite aptly so close to World Environment Day. Leaders in Climate Change Management is a capacity building program that seeks to build a pool of leaders to champion and lead climate action across sectors and geographies. A combination of online and face-to-face learning, the blended learning format of the program is expected to facilitate a better understanding of climate change and on-ground actions among senior and mid-level public officials in urban local bodies, Zilla Parishads, district, state, and national administrations. The program has been designed and implemented through the National Institute of Urban Affairs, World Resources Institute India, the United Nations Environment Program, Indian School of Business, and Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation. Today's event is also being telecast live on YouTube, Facebook, and via Zoom. To begin today's event, I request Shri Hitesh Vaidya, Director, National Institute of Urban Affairs, to felicitate our guests of honor today. Gracing the occasion today is Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, the Honorable Union Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs. May I request Shri Vaidya to felicitate the Honorable Minister. A round of applause, please. Sir, may I request you to felicitate Srimati V. Manjula, Additional Chief Secretary, Government of Karnataka. Hitesh, sir, I request you to welcome Shri Kunal Kumar, Joint Secretary, Minister of Housing and Urban Affairs. Finally, I request Shri Naeem Keruwala to felicitate Shri Hitesh Vaidya. Without further ado, I request Shri Kunal Kumar, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and invite him to deliver the welcome address and set the perspective for the event.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On this occasion, as we celebrate the World Environment Day, I feel happy and honored to formally welcome Shri Hardeep Puri, Union Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs, Petroleum and Natural Gas, Government of India. Dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen in the hall, we are at a very critical juncture of our development journey as a country. Our total population is projected to surpass the currently most populous country, which is China, by 2027. And we would have more than 50% of our population, by conservative estimates, living in urban areas well before 2050. As per some reports, 17 of the fastest 20 growing cities in the world between now and 2035 will be Indian cities. Our cities are going to be key engines of economic growth and prosperity, quality of life for everyone. They today face complex infrastructure challenges and climate change risks, which will have to be dealt with effectively for them to be able to do so. Therefore, their growth has to be sustainable and equitable. Recognizing the challenge of climate change, our Honorable Prime Minister at COP26 laid down the Panchamrit roadmap. He he said that we committed as a country that India would reach net zero by 2070. We also committed that we would increase non-fossil fuel energy capacity to 500 gigawatts, meet 50% of our energy requirements from renewable, reduce total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons, and reduce carbon intensity of our GDP by 45%, all by 2030. While other countries were talking of long-term targets, India stood its ground and made big commitments for 2030, which our cities now have to fulfill and have to gear to make action happen on ground. To achieve these goals, our cities will require a lot of innovation, participation, collaboration, and a huge boost in capacity. We have already started this journey through various urban missions of the Government of India. The Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework and the Climate Center for Cities is a step in this direction. A 68-member multi-stakeholder Global Climate Alliance has also been set up, with NIUA as the anchor to support mainstream of climate action across Indian cities. Today, we are going to witness the launch of Leaders in Climate Change Management Program, which will strengthen our capacity building efforts in the sector. As a precursor to the program, the National Institute of Urban Affairs, along with WRI India, is signing a MOU with the Administrative Training Institution of Mysuru, who are taking the lead in being one of our esteemed state partners in conduct of the program. We are also going to witness the launch of the Data Wall, an online platform designed to empower city officials, policymakers, climate practitioners with climate relevant data, visualization and resources. As Honorable Minister Sir was telling us when he was looking at the wall, we indeed now need to move towards city targets and ensure that we are on the right track as far as cities are concerned in order to meet our nationally determined climate goals. The National Photography Competition for Climate Change was held recently. Powerful and poignant images from around the country on the challenge and solutions associated with climate change and sustainability came in within the competition. The winners are going to be announced today by the Honorable Minister. In recent years, Indian cities have developed a lot of well-designed public spaces, but many of us know about them, which is why NIUA is going to release an e-book today, which is a collection of 75 such completed projects in the country in the recent past. Honorable Minister also had launched the Urban Outcomes Framework in the Surat conference held in April this year. Today, the data collection portal for the framework goes live. The integrated data portal is a shift in focus from indices to sharing data with the ecosystem. Thus, it will act as a foundation for collaborative action amongst government, academia, industry and civil society in the field of urban development. Deployment of good, well-functioning public transport is a critical element in our fight against climate change. The Transport for All Challenge was launched in April 2021, and today the best performing cities will be announced. More importantly, a never-before exercise of citizen engagement. Close to 2 lakh citizens from across many Indian cities participated and contributed to their ideas of how to improve public transport. A publication dissecting their thoughts and public transport needs as expressed by the citizens is going to be released at the hands of the Honorable Minister today. There is indeed a lot to look forward to in today's function. Once again, I would wish all of you a very happy World Environment Day, belated on the 6th of June today. The World Environment Day is 5th of June. Without further delay, I would once again formally welcome you all to this important function, and I would hand over the podium for the next part of the function. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those very engaging words, sir. I now invite on the podium Dr. O.P. Agarwal, CEO of WRI India, and Shri Naeem Keruwala, Program Director of the Cities Program at NIUA, to address the audience about the Leaders in Climate Change Management Program.
clicker. Good morning, everybody. I'll make a very quick presentation about what NIUA has been doing in terms of addressing the issue of climate change. So the Joint Secretary already talked about the Panchamrit that the Honorable Prime Minister talked about and gave it to the world during the COP26 in Glasgow. I won't get into the details about that. I think it's well known that India, we will achieve, we have targeted to become net zero by 2070. And there are various initiatives that have been taken at the National Institute of Urban Affairs, which is the apex body, a think tank of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs of Government of India. One of the very important aspects is the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework. It's one of the largest climate-related assessment frameworks that's happening across the world. It covers 1/3 urban population of the country. We have the Namami Gange, the National Mission for Clean Ganga, which has set up a river alliance for all the Ganga towns across the country, and is developing an urban river management plan. There is a climate center for cities, which has so far conducted more than 80 training workshops all across the country addressing climate change. We also have the cities program, which is supported by AFD and European Union, in which we are developing sustainable projects across 12 cities in India, selected through a challenge process. We have the sanitation and capacity building platform, which is again training a number of people and has actually helped more than 102 ULBs across Uttarakhand in developing sanitation management plans. And we have the Swachh Bharat Mission Exposure project, in which we have trained more than 6,000 officials all across the country. Just a bit more about the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework. It focuses on the 5 key areas of urban planning, green cover and biodiversity, energy and green buildings, mobility, water resource management, and waste management. It is impacting 140 million people across the country. And these are two another programs that NIUA is working on. One is with the German government, the German corporation GIZ. And another is the capacities program with ICLI and with cooperation again from multiple institutes across the world. So on that note, I'll hand it over to Dr. O.P. Agarwal to talk about the Leadership in Climate Change Management program.
Honorable Minister, sir, good morning, and friends. Kunal gave you a broad overview of what the needs are with the commitments made on climate change for the urban sector. Naeem just presented a whole set of activities that the NIUA has been involved with. What I'm going to do is now zoom in to this Leaders in Climate Change Management program, this specific program, talk a little bit about what it is and what is its design. So primarily the point is, as Kunal mentioned, very bold commitments have been made by India at the Glasgow conference, the COP26 conference last November. So action now has to shift from the negotiating table to the ground. That's where the action has to happen, and a lot of capacity needs to be built up at that ground level. So it's a very different ball game today. The stage is very different now. What we plan to do is, together with a number of other partners that I'll mention about, is can we over the next 4 to 5 years build up a pool of 5,000 climate leaders who will be the nucleus for taking action forward. That really is what this program seeks to do. Now, the target group for this kind of a program is not very senior officials. It's people at the mid-level, at the operating level, at the ground level. That's the target group that we are looking at. So it's really mid-career officials. They come from the urban local bodies. They would come from the smart city SPVs. They would come from development authorities. They would also come from the state secretariat. And they would come from, other urban services providers. So a whole range of service providers in the urban sector. That's the target group that we have. Now, with a target group like this, what is the problem? The problem is their learning preferences. They can't get away from their place of work for too long. They have to be at their place of work for longish periods. They can't get away for too long. Yet at the same time, they are at an age group where you do a very short program, give them an information overload, there's very little that they are able to retain. That's the other challenge with them. Then they need flexibility in schedules. Because of the work hours, the work timings, they need a certain degree of flexibility in the schedules when these programs are run. It can't be run at a fixed time on a fixed day. That is this flexibility that program has to happen. The more interesting thing is they are at a stage where they can't listen to lectures for too long. The way they would like to learn is by doing. And very often, if we can nudge them towards finding the solutions themselves rather than giving them the solutions, that's the right kind of a pedagogy that needs to be used for a group of this nature. And finally, as I said, they prefer to discover solutions on their own. That's the way you get better ownership of whatever you've learned. So with that in mind, we've come up with a 4-phase design structure. The first is a self-paced online learning. Over a period of 8 weeks, the expectation is they do about 1 module per week, which is roughly about a 2-hour or 3-hour commitment per week, which is not much at their own timings, at their own convenience, but about 2 to 3 hours per week, they cover 8 modules in about 8 weeks' time. The more interesting one after that is they come for a week's face-to-face event. And that face-to-face event is all about problem solving. It's all about case discussions. So it's much more of a learning by doing, learning by talking to their peers. That's the kind of pedagogy we use. Then there's a phase 3, which is about a 6 to 8 month project work that they do at their own work locations. They develop an idea, take it to some degree of detail of something that can be implemented in their location. And during this period, we provide mentoring support. So they are doing it on their own. We are providing mentoring support. This is about a 6 to 8 month period, but at their own workplaces. And finally, they come for a small closure kind of an event. A final presentation is made by them. We get them to join a kind of a community of practice where they can continue exchanging information with other experts, with their peers, so that new learning can come to them through that community of practice. This is the 4-phase design that we have come up with. This has been experimented with earlier and has proved very successful. That's why we've adopted this. The partners for this, our lead partner, of course, is the Smart Cities Mission. That's our lead partner. We have core partners. The core partners are WRI India, NIUA, UNEP, the Indian School of Business, and also the Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation. These are the core partners. We have delivery partners. We're looking to enlist many other delivery partners. Today we'll be signing an MOU with the Administrative Training Institute in Mysuru as the first delivery partner. But we are looking to build this capacity at the state level, at the state training institutes, so that this is where the program can then go further and the capacity is right there on the ground. So this is one. We have a number of other partners who've helped us in building up the material. KFW has been a big support. AFD has been a big support. We are talking to others like Austrade and the Australian High Commission. We have ISC is a partner. TERI is a partner. Number of other partners that we are working with. I think all of them coming together will really help this program going further. So with this, I just want to end up. This is the program that we have in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, OP sir and Naeem. I believe the audience agrees with me. That was a very lucid explanation of what the program will look like. The National Institute of Urban Affairs has consistently been focused on the development of initiatives and outcomes which are pioneering in its efforts to bridge the vital gap between policy and practice, which make it a premier think tank and a knowledge hub for all issues pertaining to urban development. In keeping with that vision, I request the Honourable Minister to launch NIUA's newest tools, which will act as a better decision support system to cities. At the onset, sir, may I humbly request you to launch the website and mobile application of the Leaders in Climate Change Management Program. a memorandum of understanding is being signed between the National Institute of Urban Affairs, World Resources Institute India, and Administrative Training Institute Mysuru to facilitate and host the face-to-face learning module of the LCCM program. I request Shri Hitesh Vaidya, Dr. O.P. Agarwal, and Srimati V. Manjula to sign the MOU. May I request all the signatories to kindly come together for a photograph to commemorate the signing of this partnership. Moving ahead with our launches. The Climate Data Observatory 2.0 aims to move toward data-driven governance and create a data ecosystem for supporting informed decision-making in addressing climate challenges in cities. The data wall is designed to empower its users with climate-relevant resources needed to gather insights on the city level and national progress on climate actions. CDOT, the Climate Data Wall, is available outside the venue for audience members interested in a hands-on experience. The National Photography Competition on Climate Change features the most powerful, provocative, and poignant images from across the country, which intend to create awareness about the challenges and solutions associated with urban climate change and sustainability. The photographs that qualified for the final round of the competition were able to narrate how Indian cities are trying to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels by tapping more renewable energy from the sun, even deploying solar panels on water bodies to overcome its land constraints. Transforming Urban Landscape in India, a compendium of 75 public spaces, is a first of its kind book documenting 75 exemplary public spaces in India that epitomize excellence in placemaking design interventions. The compendium celebrates the great work being done in Indian cities under the categories of transit systems, waterfront landscape, streetscape, plazas and markets, heritage, parks and temporal spaces, showcasing these examples and hoping that this will facilitate to peer-to-peer learning and inspire other urban local bodies and states to take up similar projects in their jurisdictions. The Integrated Data Portal of the Urban Outcomes Framework 2022 is a shift in focus from indices to data. The platform aims to develop a transparent and comprehensive database based on cross-city outcomes across multiple sectors. The outcomes of this exercise will be key to unlocking more equitable policies and aid the building of a sustainable society. The Transport for All Challenge was launched by the Ministry in April 2021 to encourage innovation to make public transport safe, reliable, and affordable for all Indian cities. The participating cities have shown great enthusiasm towards the challenge, and it was commendable to see cities come together with NGOs and academic institutions to conduct a massive public transport data collection exercise across India, and use that data to understand critical problems with our public transport systems. Here's a look at the Transport for All challenge journey so far and the champion cities from stage 1.
Make the survey very inclusive, which also included transgenders and the people with special ability.
நம்ம டிராஃபிக்கை மாட்டிடும் ஒரு நேரத்தில் டைவர்ஷன் பண்ணி விட்டாங்க வண்டி இப்படி போகிறாங்க அப்படி போட்டாங்க இதுக்கேற்ற பேசஞ்சர் உட்காந்துட்டோமா சீக்கிரம் போப்பா நம்ம இந்த பேசஞ்சர் கட்டுறாங்க.
The most interesting thing was that the IPT drivers and let's say even the traffic police, so they were very happy that we came to them and were speaking to them in the first place.
Dissecting Public Transport Needs in India is a publication on the findings of the surveys undertaken as part of the Transport for All Digital Innovation Challenge. The publication highlights the key achievements of the first stage of the challenge and gives insights into the critical problems faced by citizens, drivers, and conductors with public transport across more than 40 cities in India. On that note, it is my privilege to invite to the podium Srimati V. Manjula, Additional Chief Secretary, Government of Karnataka, to share her thoughts on this occasion.
Namaskar. Honorable Minister Sir, O.P. Agarwal Sir, Kunal Kumar, Mr. Hitesh Vaidya, and esteemed guests. ATI Mysore, Administrative Training Institute, Mysuru, is extremely delighted to be part of this very unique and highly relevant initiative, Leaders in Climate Change Management. Climate change management, as you all know, requires a whole of government approach, as greenhouse gas emissions are built into every aspect of our daily lives. And cities especially, considered to be the economic centers of contemporary world, contribute significantly to the climate change impact and also bear the major brunt of it. Building resilient and low carbon pathways for cities development is the foundation of climate change agenda, and for states like Karnataka, which are rapidly urbanizing, this is a very significant step. ATI Mysuru is a center of excellence for capacity building in Karnataka, and it provides training for entry-level and mid-career level officers of the state. ATA also collaborates with national-level institutions and other states also to provide training programs on customized training programs on demand. We are uniquely positioned to be part of this initiative, as we do have centers of excellence that give focused training on disaster management, sustainable development goals, social justice and equality, public-private partnership, and e-governance and data analytics. I think the LCCM program intends to cover length and breadth of all the subjects that I have mentioned here. So at ATI, we are very keen to be a partner in this program. As we all know, people are aware of climate change impacts. They know that it requires urgent action, but many times there is lack of capacity and management structures. So through this LCCM program, with the collaboration from our partnering institutions, we intend to ensure that apart from creation of awareness and knowledge, competencies are also developed among officers so that they can leverage partnerships, leverage ideas and technology and data, and formulate meaningful solutions in their own sphere of work. At ATI, we are looking forward to this initiative to learn from this and to be able to embed climate change in various training programs that we conduct at the state level and at the national level for officers as well as the elected officials. I am highly thankful to MOHUA and to the WRI, NIUA, and various partner organizations for giving ATI this great opportunity to make a difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your very engaging words, ma'am. I now humbly request our chief guest for the event, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, the Honorable Union Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs, Petroleum and Natural Gas, for the keynote address.
Distinguished colleagues from the National Institute of Urban Affairs, World Resources Institute, Shakti Foundation, United Nations Environment Program, the Indian School of Business, my friends, Mr. Vaidya, Kunal, Professor Agarwal, Manjula ji. I call you Professor. I mean, now you don't have to get a PhD degree. I mean, knowledge also leads to. It's my great pleasure to join you at this launch event of the Leaders in Climate Change Management program that has been jointly conceptualized by NIUA, WRI Institute, Shakti Foundation, UNEP and ISB. I think it is most appropriate and fitting that we are launching this program today, immediately after the celebration of World Environment Day yesterday. This program is another initiative in a long line of government interventions to not only combat climate change, but also to build a new path of sustainable development that fulfills our economic ambitions. In the last 8 years, the Modi government has taken many concrete steps in pushing the sustainability agenda forward. India championed the International Solar Alliance in 2015, along with the pioneering advocacy for climate justice in the historic Paris Agreement. At the last COP meeting held in Glasgow, the Honourable Prime Minister went a step further and stunned the world. And I use the word stunned, fully realizing what its implications are. Because he took many people, including in his own government, by surprise. But that, in a sense, reflects his own personal commitment to sustainability. He announced India's aggressive agenda on climate change through the Panchamrit Action Plan, which envisages India becoming a net zero emission country by 2070. This is one of the shortest time spans proposed between peak emissions and net zero status by a developing country, reiterating India's firm belief that the roadmap to prosperity lies in and through sustainability. The Prime Minister also committed that by the end of this decade, India will meet 50% of its energy requirements from renewable energy. Installed capacity of non-fossil fuel energy in India will stand at 500 GW. Emissions intensity of the country's GDP will drop by 46 to 48% from the 2005 levels, and that its carbon emissions will be lower by 1 billion tons. The end of the decade is also when the Sustainable Development Goals are expected to be achieved. I am confident that with these new commitments in place and the whole nation working in concert to achieve them, we will also meet our SDG targets as well. Permit me to digress from my prepared notes. Sitting through the program which the Honorable Prime Minister and Sadhguru addressed yesterday at Vigyan Bhavan, and discussing with some of my colleagues here, we did some introspection, and what stares us in the face is the speed with which time flies and how we have come on this new changed mindset. Only a few years ago, I remember when the Sustainable Development Goals or Agenda 2030 was being negotiated at the United Nations as a such set of goals, as a sequel or a follow-up to the Millennium Development Goals. I was India's permanent representative to the UN, and I helped remark, the SDGs will succeed because India will succeed. And it's an open secret that the Millennium Development Goals, the predecessor set of goals, succeeded because a large developing country, China, was able to lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty with some help from countries like India, Nigeria, and the others. But the Sustainable Development Goals, or Agenda 2030, are not only being implemented in India, and this is a good platform to make the point. My friend Professor Agarwal, Mr. Vaidya, who used to work for the UN, Kunal and I reflect on this ever so often. When I joined the Council of Ministers on 3rd September in 2017, this is no reflection on anyone, but I think the reference to the Sustainable Development Goals or Goal 11, inclusive cities, was not heard as often as it is heard today. In fact, I hazard the assessment and submission to some of you that in fact not many of us were referring to the Sustainable Development Goals at all. And I used to worry when I was in New York, and that anxiety followed me when I became a minister, that the Sustainable Development Goals will redefine our economic processes because they have to become sustainable, and that it is such a they involve such a paradigmatic shift. God only knows what will be required to bring those new set of changes, but more than those changes, our mindset has to change. But it is with a great degree of satisfaction I can tell you, not only have we traveled that journey in India, but we are actually implementing Agenda 2030 or the Sustainable Development Goals well in advance to what the United Nations agenda had set out. I had a difficulty when I was chairman of RIS, and after I'd come back, I went to New York for a function. And I tried to tell some of my friends in New York, and I have a lot of them because I've served in the Foreign Service for 39 years. I said, the Sustainable Development Goals came to the world around 2015, 2016. But the Modi government was actually implementing many of these as part of its central flagship programs when it came to power in 2014. Most of the flagship programs of the Modi government have their origin in 2014 conceptualization, but they were being implemented in 2015, June onwards. And if you look at the Swachhata campaign, or you look at the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, or any of the other campaigns, they actually predate many of the Agenda 2030 items. Why do I say this today? Because this is not a one-time action. What the Honorable Prime Minister announced yesterday, that we had succeeded in achieving 10% blending biofuels good 5-6 months before the target date. And I think that's the spirit in which we are approaching sustainability on all fronts. And I can say with a great deal of satisfaction that the Honorable Prime Minister's programs, both in the Ministries of Housing and Urban Affairs and Petroleum and Natural Gas, with which I have the privilege of being associated, this is full emphasis on green sustainability. Whether it is in the form of 10% ethanol blending already achieved, or the target of 20% ethanol blending which was set for 2030, which we are going to do by 2025, or the fact that E20 petrol will start being available at our bunks on 1st April 2023 or even earlier. But green hydrogen mission, the Honorable Prime Minister referred to that, and several others. So I think this program today, and I want to compliment all of you who have had a hand in designing it, which seeks to not only identify hundreds of climate leaders, but which seeks to focus on how these so identified people, persons, leaders will then be oriented in terms of their training and how you expect them to move forward. I think that in and of itself, the very fact that you're thinking about this is a revolutionary step. I've lived in many countries around the world. I've lived in developing countries, in developed countries. Believe me, some of the technology use, so some of the use of technology which I'm seeing progress. I mean, it's one thing to have the technology, one thing to have the data, But when we were discussing today, we are already looking at how you break that data once you have it down into targets for each city. Because at the end of the day, there's one thing that I have learned, whether it's through the Swachh Bharat mission or any others, that you have to transform a program of the government into a program of the people, which comes through a Jan Andolan. And I believe in our cities, that is the next step to which we are headed. So I want to compliment all of you for achieving this. Synthesis is maybe too artificial a word, but the integration which we are seeing and the fact that you are being able to involve the stakeholders who are the urban local bodies and other actors of responsible citizen entities and also your commercial entities in this process, I think augurs well, even though our challenges will continue to be daunting. Given our development ambitions, I believe these are bold and generous commitments, but it also demonstrates our sense of responsibility towards the well-being of our planet. India does not see these ambitions as contradictory. India is building socio-economic infrastructure that is uplifting millions of citizens from poverty, even as it is also in India reducing our carbon footprint through resilient and sustainable interventions. Through tangible impact on the ground, the Honorable Prime Minister has convinced the nation that ecological sustainability and economic progress go hand in hand. In fact, I'm delighted to find that one debate which I used to confront in my experience during outside is that as if sustainability is going to go against our economic development. I think it was an artificial debate. It did not capture the full implications. It certainly did not capture the downside that if you don't do your development in a sustainable manner, you end up paying costs which you don't anticipate at that point of time. The increasing urban footprint in India is already responsible for 44% of the overall greenhouse emissions, and this number is expected to grow as India rapidly urbanizes. It is therefore imperative that cities lead the way in mitigating emissions and create the cover to absorb the remaining emissions. I am glad that the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, state governments, and many other stakeholders in the urban sector have contributed significantly to this endeavor already and are planning even more noteworthy measures. Actions such as enhanced public transport, promotion of walkability and mobility options, energy-efficient utilities, adoption of green technologies in building and construction, and embedding of circular economy in sanitation have furthered India's sustainable development journey tremendously. In all the last 8 years, have seen reduction of more than 100 million tons of CO2 equivalent emissions through targeted interventions in urban areas. But we need to do more and we need to act now. Just yesterday, amidst the celebration of the World Environment Day, the Honorable Prime Minister reinforced this point. Several adverse impacts of climate change are already being felt. We must act now to ensure that our metro cities do not continue to see increasing temperatures and recurring flooding, or our coastal cities are not affected by frequent cyclones. This is where we need a dedicated cadre of professionals who can take up the mantle and conceive and execute proactive projects to make our cities more climate friendly and livable. Through various missions and programs, the Green government has laid down the fundamental layers of infrastructure for sustainable development. But we need talented young professionals who can fully catalyze the potential of that infrastructure to produce efficient, low-cost and resilient solutions and service for urban dwellers. India has exemplary human resources who have demonstrated their capacity for cross-cutting innovation, and we want to plug that into that advantage. I'm glad that this program, Leadership in Climate Change Management, aims to build on that by creating an expert pool of 5,000 climate leaders. These leaders are mid-level professionals and field functionaries in municipal corporations, town committees, and other urban local bodies. Officials and professionals who are intimately familiar with the challenges of climate change. I am glad that it will be these people who will learn from global best practices and lead the design and development of climate initiatives in India. I congratulate the partners of this wonderful initiative, NIUA, WRI India, UNEP, Shakti Foundation, and the Indian School of Business for coming together in developing this. I also commend the Administrative Training Institute and Mysuru for becoming the first delivery partner in this endeavor. I was impressed by the novel learning design and pedagogy that has been developed by the program. It is a unique blend of theory and fieldwork that prioritizes a learning by doing approach. The program's mandate of participants developing climate actions in their own cities is a design approach that has the potential for many innovative solutions to emerge. I hope Indian cities will take advantage of this opportunity and nominate participants in large numbers. I'm confident that in the capabilities of the climate centers for cities at NIUA in managing this program. Through its Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework and coalitions with over 60 organizations working in that space, it has already demonstrated that it can bring together stakeholders to devise creative climate initiatives in cities. I'm pleased to note that the 18 cohort cities of the City Investments to Innovate, Integrate and Sustain 2.0 program will be integrated with this initiative. I want to thank AFD, KFW and the European Union for their support for this Cities 2.0. I'm certain that your leadership on this engagement will propel other organizations to come forward to support our cities. Before I conclude, let me also say that in my 5 years or nearly 5 years as Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs, I've seen many ideas or what started off as an idea germinate and then snowball into a massive and powerful movement. I believe this is one such idea. And I also want to tell you that apart from the stakeholders that you have identified, these climate leaders could also learn from the individual experiences that we are undergoing. For instance, the Honorable Prime Minister designated an entire year as Global Housing Technology Challenge Year. We shortlisted technologies, and today we have 6 places in the country where 1,000 housing units are being constructed within 1 year using these latest technologies. Some people tell me these technologies are old, but my point is, if you are a cutting-edge technology, it doesn't matter whether you're 5 years old or 20 years old, but if you are not toxic, if you are green, and you're coming here for the first time, I think it would be very useful also to put on the horizon that all such initiatives, and I'm only mentioning one, there are several. There are people who are experimenting with newer technologies in energy, in etc. Let these climate professionals broaden their horizons and expose themselves and let them become repositories and themselves lighthouses. So that this 5,000 will then multiply 5 times over, both in terms of numbers and in terms of scope for expansion. So I look forward to seeing how these leaders in climate change management program goes in the coming years. This is an initiative which I believe will be instrumental in India achieving its climate goals. Let me also tell you, you will have the full support of my ministry and my colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your thoughtful words, sir. Your leadership has been the leading light for all our work. As the launches draw to a close, I request Shri Hitesh Vaidya, Director, National Institute of Urban Affairs, to please give the vote of thanks.
Honorable Minister, sir, dignitaries on the dais, friends who have joined from different states, cities, and all professional world, thank you. I have a very easy job to say thank you. And so thank you thank you, sir, for inspiring words. But I want to actually put in, for us, as you said, capacity building is, it's a journey. It's not a destination. And the tools you have launched today, sir, I definitely feel that they will equip our cities to leapfrog from one milestone to another. Sir, I'm really grateful for you accepting our invitation, but also that you have really emerged as a urban sustainability catalyst in the country. You have not only inspired us with your work and spirit, but also with your enthusiasm and your constant push towards innovations and ideas. Thank you for letting us be a part of your vision to link the policy with practice, and also for being the guiding light. Thank you for everything, all the support you have provided us, sir. Thank you all the participants again from the states and cities who have joined us. I also take the opportunity to thank Madam Manjula, Additional Secretary, Government of Karnataka, for her cooperation. And NIUA is looking forward to work with ATI Mysore and build a long-term partnership. And it's not only with ATI Mysore, we are collaborating with n number of partners, because NIUA alone cannot walk this journey. We need all the partners to work together. We are collaborating for innovations, solutions, new ideas with number of partners, and already talked about WRI, ISB, which are doing this LCCM program. But across other climate issues, we are looking forward. Even yesterday, we did sign a memorandum agreement with the Nature Conservancy to look at nature-based solutions within the country. So I would like to again thank Shri Kumar and the colleagues from the ministry who have really pushed the envelope and transitioning towards the action-oriented organization which NIU want to become. I envision that through leadership climate change, we will be able to establish more fruitful and long-term collaborations, partnerships for addressing climate change issues in the Indian cities and contribute to India's climate goal. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I request the LCCM core partners and NIUA team leaders to join our guests of honor on stage for a group photograph, please? Tea has been served outside. I would request our audience to reconvene in 15 minutes, whereupon we will convene a panel discussion. Silent. सारे panelists. I welcome back our audience and commence the panel discussion on building capacity for urban planning and management. Allow me to introduce our panelists today. Mr. Hitesh Vaidya is presently the director of the National Institute of Urban Affairs. He has more than 20 years of broad-based urban development policy, project formulation, implementation, and program management experience with agencies such as the United Nations, World Bank, and the US Agency for International Development. Mr. Vaidya has extensive experiences in the areas of urban development, urban governance, and urban infrastructure management. Prior to joining National Institute of Urban Affairs, he was country representative of UN Habitat India. He has been closely involved in supporting the ecosystems to design and roll out urban flagship missions in India, such as the Smart Cities mission. Mr. Atul Bagai is the country head of the United Nations Environment Programme in India. During his engagement with the UN, Mr. Bagai has worked to build the capacity of such regional networks in Asia and enable them to meet the compliance networks under the Montreal Protocol. He was instrumental in designing and development synergies in climate change policies for Maldives, Bhutan, Mongolia, and Nepal. Most recently, he was involved in the hydrochlorofluorocarbon phase-out plan for India. Mr. Anshu Bhardwaj is the Chief Executive Officer of Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation. Prior to this, he was a member of the India Administrative Services and also served as Executive Director for the Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy, also shortened to CSTEP. He holds a PhD in Engineering and Public Policy and a Bachelor of Technology in Mechanical Engineering. Professor Dr. Sanjeev Chadda is a professor and head of the Management Development Center at the Mahatma Gandhi State Institute of Public Administration under the Government of Punjab, shortened to MGSIPA. He is also the head of the Nodal Center for conducting capacity building programs for officials of urban local bodies under Amrut at MGSIPA and is the head of the MGSIPA Leadership Development Center for conduct of leadership programs in association with Chandler Institute of Governance in Singapore. In a career spanning 26 years, Dr. Chadda has worked extensively in the areas of academics and research pertaining to student activities, course design, training needs analysis, and dealing with regulatory bodies. Ms. Rajit Matthews is Program Director, Urban Development at WRI India. Her current work is centered around spatio-economic planning, the integration of land use and transport, city-regional master planning, affordable housing, alternative mechanisms to acquire plan and service land, and other similar areas. She has provided technical inputs to various committees, reports, and policies anchored by city, state, and national governments in India. Ms. Matthews has worked largely in India with further on-ground project experience in countries such as Sri Lanka, Pakistan, France, and Libya. The panel will be moderated by Dr. O.P. Agarwal, the CEO of WRI India, where he leads a team of over 200 researchers. He is a highly respected thinker and practitioner with a wealth of experience in public policy issues related to urban development, poverty alleviation, capacity building, governance, and environment. Dr. Agarwal was a member of the Indian Administrative Service from 1979 to 2007, where he held several positions. In this time, he was also the Joint Secretary in the Department of Personnel and Training and the Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Urban Development. He was Secretary of Transport in the state of Assam as well. He was principal author of India's National Urban Transport Policy, which was adopted in 2006. He was the World Bank's Global Urban Transport Advisor in Washington, D.C. for over 6 years and chaired the U.S. Transport Research Board's Committee on Transportation in Developing Countries for 6 years. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. And welcome again to everyone for the panel. I particularly thank the members of the panel to to have very kindly agreed to join this discussion. But before we start the discussion, what I would like to do is start with a small video message that has come from our chairman, Mr. Jamshed Godrej. Mr. Godrej is not only a renowned and well-known corporate leader in the country, he also is a very important philanthropist, particularly in the environment space. He chairs the board of WRI India, of the Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation, of the World Wildlife Foundation, of the Council for Energy, Environment and Water, and a number of others. His sort of contributions to sustainability have been immense and over 30 years so far. So a small message that he has sent is something that was a really delightful message. I would request if that message could be played before we start the discussion.
Last November, at COP26 meeting in Glasgow, India committed to achieving bold targets by 2030 and also attaining net zero by 2070. What is now needed is action on the ground. Cities are where nearly 70% of the growth in emissions will take place, and so action must now move from the global negotiating table to our cities. Unfortunately, at the ground level, an understanding of climate issues and the actions needed to achieve our goals is weak. This calls for a mammoth effort at building capacity at the ground level. Building capacity at scale, especially for mid-career practitioners, is not an easy task. It needs a teaching style that facilitates learning by doing. It needs a recognition of the fact that the people involved already have a heavy workload and cannot be away from their workplaces for long. Therefore, it is a pedagogical and logistical challenge. In this case, yet another challenge will be in converting the complex climate terminology into one that can be understood at all levels. Given these challenges, I am really happy that the Minister, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, has agreed to launch this Leaders in Climate Change Management Program. It is befitting that he is launching this, as it demonstrates his interest in moving India's commitments forward in his jurisdiction. This will be an important message to all other sectors and to all other countries. I must congratulate all our partners, WRI India, the Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation, the National Institute of Urban Affairs, UNEP, and the Indian School of Business, who have come together to design and develop this program. I'm very happy that the Administrative Training Institute in Mysuru has taken the lead in being a delivery partner. With this, I once again congratulate all our partners, and I thank Minister Hardeep Singh Puri for taking the lead in furthering this capacity building effort. Clearly, the message to the rest of the world, as demonstrated by him, is that India is serious about its commitments and fully intends to reach its goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Godrej. That's very powerful words coming from you. Now, with that, moving to this discussion, we've been talking about building capacity for climate change management. And what I want to do is take advantage of a panel like this to broad-base that discussion. Go beyond climate change alone, but take it into what are the kinds of capacities that we need to build up in our urban sector? How can we do that? What are the methods that can be adopted? Really broad-base the discussion of capacity building going beyond climate. Of course, climate is going to be important, but go beyond that. The reason I say this is our urban population is really projected to double in the next 30 years. Going from about 400 million today to over 800 million in the next 30 years is achieving what we did from the beginning of civilization till now is going to be achieved in the next single generation. That's the kind of tsunami, as I call it, which is really taking place in our cities. And cities are going to be important for many other reasons. One, we've articulated an ambition to become a $10 trillion economy. I think good ambition that we need to articulate, need to work towards. But going from 2.75 billion that is there today to 10 billion is a near quadrupling in the next 8 to 10 years. Cities will be the place that has to accommodate this growth, in fact, even enable this growth. So that's where cities play an important role. Second, as the Honorable Minister said this morning, climate commitments, a lot of the action will have to be in the cities. A lot of the future growth and emissions will happen in cities as our economic growth takes place. So cities again will be the stage where a lot of those climate commitments will have to be met. Finally, the last thing that I keep talking about when we talk of cities, COVID has shown us that the agglomeration economies that we talk about as important for urban areas has actually proved that in certain cases it can be a disadvantage. So how do we deal with agglomeration economies and yet try to make sure that our cities don't become places where these kind of pandemics spread rapidly? So these are many challenges our cities face. The big rapid growth is of course one of the most important. What do we do about them? So with this, what I would hope is that some of the recommendations coming out of this group would be able to feed into the work that an expert committee set up by the ministry is a committee of experts to develop capacity building programs, recommend capacity building for planners in the country. The fact that this committee was set up on the basis of the finance minister's budget speech or something included in that really shows that the government itself is recognizing the need for building capacity in urban areas. I think that's why it found place in the finance minister's budget speech itself. And as a follow-up to that, a committee has been set up, and I'm hoping that thinking coming out of this group would help feed into that committee. So with that, let me start with Mr. Sanjeev Chadda. Mr. Chadda is part of the Mahatma Gandhi State Institute of Public Administration, MG-SIPA as it is known. The question to you is, heading a training institute at a state level, to what extent are you seeing capacity gaps in the state? What kind of programs are you thinking of running? I mean, what is the way forward that you are thinking of at the state level? Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, and good afternoon to all of you. So there are considerable gaps in terms of capacity which needs to be built up. Firstly, if we talk about the personnel who are coming to the urban local bodies as well as those belonging to the town and country planning, the kind of curriculum that they have, it is resigned from what is actually happening in the ground. And last 7-8 years, what has happened is kind of, it has catapulted us at the world level in terms of, whether it was Swachh Bharat Mission or Amrut or smart cities. So these things has been, they're not part of the natural curriculum. And in terms of, we also undertake training programs for the PCS officers and IAS officers. Basically, now in terms of development, they are the ones who have to take it forward from the professional cadres. But at the end of the day, it is seen that even they do not know much about these aspects. And of course, they get transferred from one department to the other. But this is such a very important department that, having knowledge about these aspects will be such relevant. Then there's gaps between the master plan and the various projects that are launched in terms of the Government of India projects and the state government projects also. Many a times they are not coherent with each other. So therefore there are problems there itself. And we have two cadres, like I said, one is urban local bodies, that's a different cadre. Then the town and country planning is a different cadre altogether. And they both live in their own silos. There's not much of coherence between them as such. And then overall, if you go by, I think generally we have 164 urban local bodies in the state of Punjab. And generally if you go by, and of course this is everywhere in other parts of the country also, the quality of the manpower is not so good, even the quantity is not so good. And the technology wise also, they do not have much, hands-on approach to this extent. And further, one more thing, because we were partners to Amrut also, wherein we did lot of programs for Amrut. Now we are partners in NJJM also. So this is based upon, how we interacted. There's lot of, gap between how the elected representatives go by and how the officialdom goes by. And in official also there are two aspects. One is the, which I said, the IAS, PCS, which, they keep on being transferred from one place to other, but they had. And many a times, the professional cadre is not been able to take up these. So there's a lot of, in terms of capacity, it desires a lot.
Let me, I can't resist the temptation because I see Manjula here, who's heading the ATI in Mysore. Can I pose the same question to you? How do you see this in Mysore? Is there a, can you just
I just wanted to compliment what he said. It is true there is a paucity of capacities at various levels. While we are talking about urban planners, etc., one of the things that we notice is, because when we are talking about climate change, we are also talking about infrastructure, how resilient that infrastructure has to be, and the services, because urban areas, when there is any, let's say, a disaster, etc., how do you ensure this infrastructure is able to keep up and services are delivered despite the disaster to people? It's an important aspect. So one of the things we notice is that most of the training is always focused at the higher levels, and the cutting edge people don't get exposure to proper training. So we are actually not really reaching the message across to them, and therefore it is important that any training program first looks at JEs and the health inspectors and those who are not really taken into consideration and ignored. See, so I just focus on the JEs per se. We realized many of them don't even know how to, they're all civil engineers. Now we are talking about transport and how it contributes to emissions and so on. But they are not trained to design roads in a better manner. So one of the things which we have taken up now is to ensure through our partner institute, State Institute of Urban Development, to train the JEs so that they are able to understand how to design proper infrastructure, proper roads. So I think we need to make programs to reach the cutting edge level, and that's, I think, is one of the most important one. Otherwise, we may be training at the top level, but we would not be able to actually translate what we want into action, because the people who are going to act may not have any idea about that.
Thanks, Manjula. Good, I'll come back to both of you with another question that I have in my mind, but let's just go around a bit. Let me turn to Atul. Atul, heading UNEP, and seeing what it means for the environment, what the urban sector means for the environment. How do you see this? What is UNEP's sort of ideas? What thoughts do UNEP have on this? Any thoughts from you on the urban sector capacity building?
No, I was looking at, while there's some good discussions which happened in the morning also, and I think Kunal placed the whole problem metrics very well in terms of how important cities are. I was trying to look at it from a little bit of a macro level, from an environmental perspective, meaning we are now at a global level, the narrative is that it's just not the climate change that is the big crisis, but it's also the crisis of biodiversity and the crisis of pollution, air and waste. And I think all these three planetary crises come together or converge at a city level. And I think that approach needs to be taken by the city administrators, that while these three planetary crises find their magnitude at a city level, addressing one of them, the interconnectedness will help in addressing the other two also. So if we are looking at, for example, building urban forests, we are also trying to address climate change and pollution to a large extent. And I think that understanding, as Manjula is rightly saying, needs to percolate really down to the lowest levels at the city level. I'll give this as an example. Recently, on the request of the UP government, we organized a 3-day training program for the air pollution staff of the Pollution Control Board positioned at a city level in Agra. Of course, the pollution control boards of other states also joined, and all the 19 cities which are considered as the most polluted in UP also joined that 3-day training program. And it was amazing to see that the people who were actually addressing air pollution issues at the city level actually did not understand how air pollution was happening in their cities, what were the apportionment being done for the cities, how it has to be tackled. They were basically collecting data as they were the monitoring centers of air pollution. Beyond that, what needs to be done was something that they were not understanding. And I think had they understood the scene of how air pollution issue can be addressed, they would then need to interconnect with the other city departments which would be affecting climate change or biodiversity. So I think I agree with Manjula, that kind of understanding of environmental mitigation which is there at a global level or a national level needs to be understood at the city level. And I think the capacity building programs that are being organized, and this LCCM is going to be a huge initiative in this regard, is something that needs to take into account that while we're talking of climate change, we need to bring the other elements also in.
Thanks, Atul. I think it's very, very interesting you say this, your experience with the program that you did in UP, that while we talk at one level and at a certain level of understanding, what's really happening or the understanding at the level where the action really has to happen, there it's a very different ballgame. And that's really what you're bringing out. I think that's very powerful. Let me turn to Anshu. Anshu, I don't think this program would have gone anywhere if it wasn't for the enthusiasm and the encouragement that you gave at a very early stage. I must say that, I say there are two people who are responsible for helping get this to this space, is Anshu from Shakti and Kunal Kumar in the ministry. I think these two really were the first champions. And they are the most important, because once something gets moving, many others do join the bandwagon. But when a product is just not known and someone comes forward, I think that champion is the most important. So really thanks to you for having done this. But again, you've been in the IAS, you've seen cities, from your field level postings. What is your perspective on the kind of capacity building needs in the cities? Are we doing things right the way we are? Are there any changes that we need to make? What is your thinking on this?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the kind words. It was conceptualization and vision was yours. We're happy to support and really happy to be involved in this initiative. So my take is the following, and I pick up on some points which were discussed in the first half when people talked about India's pledges in COP, in particular net zero by 2070. I don't think we have really understood what we have pledged in COP, the implications of net zero by 2070. And in particular, the fact that it is a fundamental transformation of our economy, our infrastructure, everything. That has not really sunk into us, and naturally, because what India has committed is something which no other country has attempted in the past. Most countries followed a model where their emissions peak, now they're trying to decarbonize. Whereas what we are saying is, our most modeling studies say India's emissions will peak at around 4 or 5 tons and then get to net zero. So it's not just about climate mitigation alone, it's a fundamentally different economic paradigm. Now that links to everything, cities, how we produce goods and services, how we make food, everything. Coming to cities, sir, it's been mentioned that cities will be the most important demand center in the country. Now, in terms of energy services, it will be the highest demand centers. What is not clear is whether the solutions to that lie within cities' jurisdiction. For example, most power comes from outside. Most goods and services do come from outside. So if we want to make cities, quote unquote, carbon neutral, we need to figure out what solutions are within cities' jurisdiction and what lie outside. So in that sense, what you have initiated is something very important to help build capacity in the various decision makers in urban local bodies, city administrations, and also the political executives. It's important to get them involved in this initiative because at the end of the day, they will be championing it. So that's what I would say, sir. And other parties, cities will be facing the impacts of climate change as well. We saw in Delhi what happened last 1 month because of heat waves. The severe heat wave which struck us last 1 month, where
temperature went to 49 degrees Celsius is only a sign of things to come. And therefore, mitigation and resilience, how we can go hand in hand, will become very crucial for our decision makers.
Thanks very much, Anshu. I think that is really good. Resilience and mitigation have to go hand in hand. I've always believed that we've always had problems raising funds for resilience. It's easier to raise money for mitigation because whatever you do on mitigation gives you global benefits, so people are willing to pay for that. Resilience is an improvement in your own backyard. So often you have to raise money for that locally. That's one of the challenges we've seen between mitigation and resilience, but I think a program like this, if resilience also finds strong space, I think that's going to be very useful. Let me turn to Rajit. Rajit, you call yourself an urban designer. You're an architect, but you call yourself an urban designer. You're trained in that. You worked as a consultant earlier. You're now working with WRI. You work closely with many cities. What is your understanding of the kind of capacity gaps and, what is it that we need to focus on? Not just on climate, but overall on city planning. Both Anshu and Atul spoke about actions that need to happen outside of silos. Things that should not happen in silos. A bit of a larger thinking, a more comprehensive nature of the thinking. And so what is your view? Where is the kind of gaps that you see in that?
Thank you, OP sir, and many congratulations to all the partners here for this new initiative that's been launched. In terms of our work, when we worked with cities over the past 15, 20 years for me, we've seen two sides of the problem. One is the institutional side of the problem, where public institutions, as mentioned by other panelists, there is a capacity and a capability gap. The capacity, of course, being in the number of, like for example, the ratio of planners to people is one of the lowest in India as compared to, say, Canada. So we don't have enough people to solve public problems in the first place. Then when it comes to actual people within the system, what is their ability to have the broadest conception of problems like climate change, and then to figure out solutions for that. It is not in their daily, work profile to do research and development. They have to run the city, they're managing the city. So they don't have the bandwidth to look at research, understand all those complex numbers, the models. It's just numbers, put out for them. So I think, and this is very trainable. It's just that not in their daily, work profile. So that's one part of the problem, which is the institutional part. The other is the gap between institutions and players out there. There are excellent solutions being provided by social entrepreneurs, by industry, by academia, by civil society. There are a number of providers even for training and skill building. But the gap between the government reaching out to these other institutions and entities is very large. You can easily use their spare capacity to improve your training programs. So I think to summarize, while we have these two gaps, on the one hand, government should be building its capacity to be able to deliver on complex challenges such as climate change, but at the same time, they don't have to wait till their full capacity is built. Through partnerships, like the one we are seeing today, that is the best way forward to solve our capacity gaps. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajit. That's very interesting. Again, you are echoing in many ways the points that Anshu and Atul also mentioned, the big gap between what we talk here and what's really there in the city. And then, as you mentioned, they are so caught up with their day-to-day stuff that really an ability to think beyond what do I have to do in the next 1 hour, they don't have the bandwidth for that kind of thing. But moving to Hitesh now. Hitesh, you are really at the fulcrum of all this. Everything that we are talking about ultimately lands on your very capable shoulders of building the kind of capacities that are needed. But the first part of my question really to you is, again, what are you noticing as the capacity gaps? The same thing that I tried to get across, but same thing to you.
Thank you, sir. And again, congratulations for this program. I think this vision getting fructified.
To you.
So, but it was your vision, and we are just taking it forward. So, congratulations for that. On the capacity gap, which you have asked me, my major thing is that, we talk about climate at a policy level or at a global level. the language which we talk and the grammar which we used is totally different grammar when you go to a city level. So I think the biggest step is our grammar has to be same. If we really want to talk about capacity issues at the city level, because our language and their language do not match. You know, they talk about sectoral issues. For them, climate does not make anything. So how does the sectoral issues lead to a climate is the gap which we have to build it. So that's one area where I particularly think we need to really bridge that gap. And second thing which has been talked about, we are only talking about individual capacity. But individual capacity will not alone do anything unless we start talking about institutional capacity. And the question is the jurisdiction, the way. So I particularly think it is more of a governance of climate, which is much more important than only just taking a climate in a silo. So who actually govern that city level? And it leads to a bigger issue, which may not be at this right at this moment of time to discuss. But I think while we talk about climate issues or any other capacity issues, we always tend to talk about very, very narrow sense. So I think we need to really go back to the drawing board and say, are our cities equipped enough? Are they prepared enough to take these gaps? So, and if that is the question we want to ask, then we need to really start looking. And I tend to, even though it may not be politically correct to say, but I think it's 25, 30 years of 74th Amendment. If it has not worked, there's a right time to throw it out of into the dustbin and start thinking, because new issues have emerged. When I was a student, there was no air pollution discussion, there was no climate discussion, there was no other discussion. The new areas emerging, and with this exponential growing urban world, we need to really start evolving our capacity building tools and techniques rather than stuck to one side of the story. That's what I particularly feel.
Interesting. I think you've put me on a different track now. Let me move to this. The whole thing of what existed as a problem earlier, you have very different kind of problems coming up. And the question I often ask is, the kind of planners or the kind of people coming out of the educational system, how well equipped are they in understanding the newer kind of problems that are coming up, right? So it's something that we need to look at even our academic curriculum to see if that really matches up to today's need. So going back again to Sanjeev and Manjula, what do you think is the opportunity for the state training institutes to tie up with academia? Do you see some kind of a complementarity in what they do? Do you think that would help serve the purpose? Sanjeev first and then.
Yeah, I think, sir, the kind of the placement that the state institutes, the administrative training institutes have, I think that they are the best suited to carry out this program forward, because all state officials and even the government of India, the tie-ups, they somehow, one point or the other, they go through the state ATIs. All PCS officers, like if I talk about Punjab, all IAS officers, and even all the departments, let's say around 50 odd departments that we have, one point or the other they have to go through. Secondly, the state ATIs have the kind of infrastructure that is required to roll out good courses at such good level. Infrastructure in terms of, the halls, others, and then also the persons who can develop the content, the resource persons, they are available. And like we were talking about the various kinds in terms of, the academicians, they are involved with the state ATIs. The officers who are serving and officers who have retired, they are also involved in terms of advisors, senior advisors, consultants, those people who have actually got, a lot of exposure in the field. Plus the kind of tie-ups that the state ATIs, like if I can talk specifically about our ATI, we have tied up with the Chandler Institute of Governance in terms of, which is at Singapore for leadership programs. We have also tied up with the Korean Institute for the programs that we roll out for the PCS and IAS officers. And our ATI was one of the ATI which took, the full program for the IAS officers after Labsana, Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy. So it's one of the institute on our own, though we have, you know, certain, they come to us for roughly 4 weeks or so, but full program that we did for wherein 55 trainees from all over the country, from 18 states they attended. So I think overall, in all, the capacities are therein, but somehow the kind of work that we should be doing, frankly, honestly, we are not doing that kind of work in terms of, you know, both like somebody talked about research part, maybe because of lack of resources and others. But yes, the Government of India flagship programs like Amrut, Smart City, then Swachh Bharat Mission, even we are into NJJM, KRC of also National Jal Jeevan Mission also. Plus this latest, we were the ones who rolled out Climate Center for Cities, C-Cube also.
So let me move to Manjula. I mean, basically what I'm trying to ask is, do you see a complementarity between academia and the state training institutes? Is there a role that both of them could play together? Is there some kind of complementarity?
Sir, as administrative training institutes, we don't have capacity or expertise in every field. So generally for every training program, we tend to invite resource persons from the academia. So there is always this collaboration because we need to get the experts to come and speak. But and we also get the practitioners. So we need to ensure that the issue of grammar and language that Mr. Ritesh mentioned. See, sometimes the academia comes and they talks at a very high level. So that may not be understood by the people there. And they may have their own difficulties because they will think, okay, it is good in theory, but may not be good in practice. So we tend to get both the academia and the practitioners, because people also need to know somebody has done that. They have tried that and done that. So people learn from example more rather than just by theory. So in this context, I think building toolkits, building checklists, building case studies and showing them would be a very good way of ensuring that they learn from the experience of others. And that is something which we are trying to do in terms of getting best practices from elsewhere and making case studies out of it. And I just wanted to mention one thing about checklist. We all keep talking about, okay, this is what they need to do, but how do they do that? So a simple thing about giving a checklist which they will check before something happens, like when we were in the field, before every rainy season, engineers were supposed to go check the tanks and then fill a checklist to see whether those bunds are strong or not, whether the wasteways are okay, or so that when there is a heavy rainfall, this breach doesn't happen, etc. These are best practices, but these get kind of forgotten over a period of time. So important also to give them toolkits or checklists which they can use. Thank you.
So effectively what you are saying is, while there is a need for sort of linkage between academia and the training institutes, there is also a need to be able to convert that academic conversation into something that will be understood at the ground level, make it more practical. Great, great. So again, now coming to Atul again. Atul, again pulling you back to LCCM, frankly, you were one of the first few who agreed to come on as a core partner for the LCCM program. What is your vision about this program? What would you like this program to do? How would you like to see it getting furthered, and if possible going out, through the UNEP channels, going beyond India? What is your thinking on that? Any ideas on this?
Well, today I think most of the discussion has been around cities and urban areas and the importance of the cities, and we're trying to frame the whole LCCM from that perspective. I would like to add one element that this kind of program, you need to bring in the other 50% that is there in India, the rural economies, the rural areas. We should not forget that carbon emissions from agriculture or from rural areas is also almost as much as from, or if not as much, a little less than from the cities. So I think that's an important element that UNEP would certainly like to assist with in terms of developing this? Of course, I think right now, as a phase one, the focus should be on the cities because that's also a low-hanging fruit, which you should be looking at in terms of taking this forward. The second element I was thinking in terms of how this whole program can benefit from UNEP would largely be the robustness and the dynamic nature of any capacity building effort, meaning you cannot build a curriculum which will last you 10 years or 15 years. It may not even last you 6 months because of the dynamic nature of the environmental shifting that is taking place. And I think that's where UNEP could be helpful in trying to bring in the latest science which is there at the global level on climate or biodiversity, on pollution, to feed into the curriculum or the kind of courses that are going to be developed. And I think leaders, you're looking at 5,000, need to be aware of the dynamic changes that are taking place. And in fact, if you're looking at climate change, it takes the COP that takes place once a year, apart from the subsidiary body meetings, the whole international narrative is changing weekly in terms of the knowledge that you'll have to bring to your practitioners or people who are acting at the local level. So I think that science is something that we can bring. The second, of course, is there is a lot happening on capacity building at global level in various countries. And those methodologies, those approaches are something that can be brought to the doorsteps of LCCM. In terms of trying to see how you look at innovative approaches of capacity building. Thirdly, certainly technical experts from UNEP, from our networks globally can be brought in. You were talking of projects in the morning, 6 to 8 months. In fact, that could be a very useful area where, in fact, why UNEP, all the UN agencies and philanthropies or other institutions working in India, the kind of network of programs and projects they have in India could be a good ground for these climate practitioners to be associated with and do their 6 to 8 month kind of a project work. Finally, I think one very important element that you should be looking at is this whole Karm Yogi program of the Government of India, where LCCM should get linked to the IGOT. That would be a very useful connection for not only these 5,000 practitioners you are aiming at, but also the vast multitude of civil services that are there who could benefit from the kind of effort that is going in developing the course modules. Why just limit it to the 5,000 people? Meaning all the civil services and Chadda Saab and Manjula were talking about. I think they can also benefit from whatever course material is coming forward. And finally, I think Hitesh has hit the nail on the head on the language, and that's where I think LCCM needs to be very careful. Both Anshu and you are aware of our very first meeting with the Bihar secretaries on the low carbon pathway strategy that we are all making together. And the language we were all speaking was something that interrupted the meeting drastically because the secretary sitting across listening to us could not understand the scientific nature of the presentations we were making. So we need to make the language very simple. And when we are talking of, as Manjula is talking of junior engineers or people, air pollution experts sitting in a pollution control board in a city, you cannot expect them to be talking of the international language or understanding the international language that comes from the UN. So I think that's a big responsibility all of us have, that the UN verbose language needs to be made very, very understandable to the actual 5,000 leaders and others you're looking at.
Thanks, Atul. I think a number of very interesting points. So, well, you're absolutely right. It needs to go beyond urban. We are only starting with the urban sector. And as you recognize that, it's good to start from there. But definitely the plan is to go beyond. And the 5,000 is only a start. You know, the questions that have often been coming up, people have confused. These are 5,000 people who are getting into some kind of a deeper capacity building program. What you need is probably 5 million or 50 million who need to be made aware of what these issues are. So right now we are looking at just this 5,000 who have a deeper knowledge and maybe become the nucleus around whom others get built up. So that's really the idea of the 5,000. Your idea, your point about the language and the example that you gave in Bihar, I think that is something that all of us have experienced. The language we speak here and the language that is spoken even in the state secretariat. Forget about the ground level. It's a world of difference. And one other, point that you brought up, which I found very interesting. You see, there are capacity building programs and capacity building programs and capacity building programs. If you do 1 day, 2 day, 3 day kind of capacity building program, there's so many of them going on. And what we've heard from many is that, people at the ground are often fed up with so many programs, which one do I go for? So is there a way in which all these can be embedded into some kind of a compulsory program that everyone goes through? Make it a part of that. So that's something that everyone attends. Sometimes, one-off capacity building programs don't get the kind of participation you're really hoping to achieve. And that was one of the reasons why we thought that let this be a longer involvement than just be a 2 or 3 day kind of a thing. So that's some of my thoughts on the points that you very rightly brought up. But moving to Anshu. Anshu, again, getting on to, the same question really that I asked Atul. What do you think should be the direction of this capacity building thing? What should be the institutional arrangements? What is your thinking on this, from your own experience? How do we spread this much more effectively?
Thank you, sir. Quick thoughts. Most of them have been very nicely already mentioned by Atul, sir, so I'll probably pick up some of those threads. I echo the fact that 5,000 is just a starting point, and it needs to be much bigger, at a much bigger scale, just because climate is a central problem to everything. I also pick up your point on capacity building programs. So why, there are so many programs which run in various sectors. So what makes this special? I would submit, sir, that climate is central to everything, the way we see it. Climate is central to health, climate is central to water, climate is central to agriculture. So you cannot have a capacity building program in one sector without weaving in the climate narrative. And thus, it makes this particular thing special. Because as I said earlier, it's not just climate. You cannot talk about climate mitigation or resilience. In Indian case, it's a new paradigm altogether, how we move from here onwards in the next 30, 40 years. So bringing climate to the center of discussion, whether it is in an urban local body or a gram panchayat or a jila panchayat, I think that is very important. Which I think this program hopefully will do. I also agree with Atul sir that gradually let's move beyond cities to also rural areas. Can we target gram panchayat, jila panchayat and bring climate into that discourse? And finally, I echo the science to policy connect. So we have brilliant scientists who understand climate science, who understand the various nuances of climate science and its impact on various sectors. But how do we connect with the decision maker in a manner which the decision maker understands policy relevant information? So that I think will be a great contribution in this program.
Thanks so much. I think, right now the way we focused LCCM is the person on the ground. The person who's not only given a basic understanding of climate, a very basic understanding of climate, but a lot more focus on how do you bring climate thinking into the work that you are doing? If you are a public transport operator, how do you bring climate thinking into what you do? If you are a waste management kind of a person, how do you bring climate thinking into what you do? So that's what we've tried to do in the LCCM today, is simplify some of the basic understanding of climate, but convert it into how does this impact your work? So that's what we've been trying to do. But let me now come to Rajit. Rajit, what I would like to understand from you, or your thoughts on we're now talking of state training institutes. We've talked about academia, but at a larger level, if this kind of capacity building, I'm not saying only on climate or only LCCM, but the larger gamut of building capacity for improved urban planning and management, what should be the kind of an institutional architecture that the country should have? You know, you have NIUA, you have state training institutions, but what do you see as a larger institutional architecture that will help sort of take up the program at a very ambitious level?
Right. Thank you, sir. One would be, of course, we have to move towards a training market. If we don't have a robust market, it will be very difficult to change the status quo that we're in right now. And one way to do that would be to actually move towards a networked platform. This could be publicly backed, government backed. I'll take the analogy of the sharing economy because that would be a useful way to put it. You know, today we have Uber, Amazon, Skype. They're all shared economies because they're using our phones, our cameras, our internet connections, and providing excellent service. You know, the outcome is very good, but they've used somebody else's resources. However, they manage the rules of the game. They ensure that who can collaborate on their platform, what are the rules of engagement, what is the quality control, there are feedback loops installed. So in that way, there's a good management of the system, and then they back out. Then it is between the person who's providing that service and the customer. So they actually set it up and then they've moved out. I think government should take a similar role in a network platform mode, where they assess the demand and supply gaps. They assess the gap between the skill of people and what the industry requires. So ensuring quality trainings, bringing on board institutions that can deliver these various trainings, and then pull out, because only government cannot solve the problem. Of course, they are the primary sort of people we would look forward to manage such a platform. But they should take on different players to bring in this kind of networked platform of training. That robust market, when done well, can only improve over time. And then the linkages between industry, you know, academia, institutions, government, and society itself will then become very strengthened. You know, then we'll have a good training market in place. Thank you.
So really creating that institutional architecture really as a network, not single institutions here and there, but a kind of a platform where many can feed into and many can pick up from. Now, when Rajit kept talking about government should do this, I think what she meant was NIUA. So, you know, government is too amorphous a word. NIUA really have to be that anchor. So the question to you is then, what do you think of a network like this? You have so many programs with so many different partners. Your Climate Smart C-Cube itself has 60 different partners. What do you think of the thought that Rajit has given in terms of creating that network? If you think that's useful, how do you think you can go about doing it? But NIUA really has to be the focal point on that.
Yeah. No, I fully agree what Rajit has said, and that is what we have started. We call ourselves as an aggregator. So role of NIUA is more of an aggregator and really help the urban ecosystem. So that is what the journey we have done. On the capacity building side, Atulji talked about IGOT. We have started NULP, National Urban Learning Platform. This is actually for urban practitioners. Definitely some of them will be linkage with IGOT. We are using almost a similar platforms. And idea is slowly once we develop one for urban platform, but for the other practitioners, we can start linking that with the DOPT model and all. So we have already started working on that model. But I think as an aggregator, when we are looking at it and what platform approach, it is not only the capacity thing, but I think what Manjula ma'am talked about, what type of tools which are available with the cities. So if we can make those tools available, whether it's a checklist form, whether it's an assessment form, and you know, if city has to, where it falls in that assessment, how it can really start looking at it. Second thing which we think as an aggregator, because all of us working on a climate issue with all the 60 partners, everybody has its own agendas, its own way of doing it. How as an NIU bring those together and create one model RFP or a model template or a model thing. So that gives an idea that they can use more than that, but this is the minimum viable product which is required. And that if we can get that MVP right, I think that's the one contribution as an aggregator we need to provide. Third thing is, we all talk about different levels. So can we have one standard? This is a minimum viable product. This is standards we want to make. As a think tank or a anchor of this thing, we need to come up with those standards. Fourth, training and capacity building because of NULP and other is a one component of it. But it's the overall in a larger component we have to start doing it. Transfer of knowledge. So I have called it within NIUA last 1.5 years, we have called it 5T approach to become an aggregator. And this 5T is tools, templates, technologies, training, and transfer of knowledge. So that's how we are looking at the role of urban Uber, if I can call it, for NIUA to become. And I think that's the only way we can reach the scale. Otherwise, we will be doing our siloed approaches. And if we have to reach a scale which is much, much higher than what we are even imagining, I think we need to adopt this network and platform approach and has to link with the capacity grid, create a capacity grid within the country. This platform should really help the states and cities to really take it forward.
Fascinating. I think to me this has been a fascinating discussion on a topic that is very close to my heart. So with this, just one little thought I would leave behind as a kind of a summation of all this is we're really looking at institutions, we are looking at individuals, we are looking at, let's say, pedagogy. That's an important thing. Content is generally available in plenty. It's sifting the content, bringing it together into a form that gets transferred well. I think these are some of the key messages that I'm picking up. NIUA has so many partners. I think the point about being an aggregator is, to my mind, a great idea. How do you play that aggregator's role? I think that's going to be a very important thing. But with that, let me thank all the panelists. Thank you so much for the fascinating discussion. Thanks to Manjula, whom I brought in from the audience, but thank you for your contributions. And thanks to everyone who's here. Thanks for staying on. Let me pass it back to you for closing. Thank you. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Very, very interesting discussion. One point that comes to my mind is when we are on a journey and we have a milestone to achieve, is there a surveillance and monitoring mechanism for ensuring that when we started, where we wanted to reach, are we going in the right direction? So that's the point I just wanted to check back, if there is anything, any institutional mechanism available in this whole setup to make sure that we reach the 5,000 mark and 50,000 mark subsequently as we decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good question. You want to take that?
No, I think definitely when I was talking about standards, that was the idea, was we create a KPIs, we create those monitoring frameworks where we start establishing them, because otherwise what they were doing, whether they are reaching the same destination, we all start a journey together. But, it's like if I call up Devdutt Patnaik, it's, hope for the land which you have to, if you have to give that hope, then you need to have those monitoring frameworks in place. Yeah.
I think that's a great question, and I think that's something that we should bear in mind, that to put together this in. Any other questions from the audience, please? 1, 2.
Thank you, sir. Jaswant Singh, I represent Institute for Spatial Planning and Environment Research at Panchkula. We are partners with NIUA. Talking about 2-3 things here, one is, when we are talking about urban planning or urban development, climate change is not part of our language. In curriculum level also. As I think Dr. Chadda has also pointed out, and Hitesh also, I think, mentioned that. So we need to, bring that into the core of our syllabus. And for that, academia need to work on that. So that's one point. Second is that, we are always forgetting when we are talking about climate change, the urban periphery. That's not part of our main language. We don't talk about, we always talk about problems of urban areas. and we try to find solutions for those. So urban periphery is where the climate change, we can work on that. Because that's immediately surrounding the urban area. There you have your forest, there you have your lakes, there you have your ponds, agriculture areas. So how to sustain those areas, I think that should also form part of our language. That should start, featuring into our curriculum also, as well as, in our programs also, in our trainings also. Then the issue is, what we are talking about. We have talked about first. Now we are Amrut. We have the master plan approach for GIS-based master plan for 600 cities, class 1 cities. Now we are moving into Amrut 2.0. There also the master plan approach is there. Master plan is a kind of approach where we find
if
that.
you don't keep it short, we'll forget what you asked. So. No, the points are well taken. Does anyone want to comment on this?
The points he is making is perfect, and then that is what we are trying to build up, those lessons, and make that our training course, or design in those sessions, that those challenges which he has been talking about are part of those design when we are doing it, in the LCC.
No, I think he's raising very pertinent points, and that was the issue I was raising, that when we are talking of climate change in a city, we should be talking of biodiversity and pollution also. The urban forests, the urban wetlands, all the areas surrounding the cities are very important in this whole framework.
Just a closing point. I think NIUA, it's time NIUA scaled to being in multiple places across India. We need regional centers that can do the same things in terms of being a network platform. So that growth is not seen.
The point that I heard is that in all this thinking and the day-to-day work at the urban level, at the ground level, climate doesn't figure. That's what I thought was the thrust of what you were trying to make out, which is true. Today so many different topics are becoming very important, but we are used to working in a certain, say if you're talking of transport, you're talking of moving people safely from one place to the other. Climate doesn't figure in that. And that is where climate needs to start coming into everything. And that's why what we are trying to do here in this LCCM really is picking up people coming from different areas of work, but getting them to think in terms of how climate has to get into their own thinking, in terms of their own work, and what kind of partnerships they need to get into with their colleagues. So that's really what we're trying to achieve through this. But your point is very well taken.
Sir, I'd just like to add upon this. Based upon our experience on CQ, the kind of clientele that we had was very varied in terms of the topics that we covered. For the energy, we had people from PIDA, Punjab Energy Development Authority, or Chandigarh Energy Development, or Haryana Energy Development. For biodiversity and all, we had trainees from the forest departments, from both, let's say, Haryana, Punjab, Chandigarh, because we are in proximity, so it's easier for us. And for certain areas, like we had people from ULBs. So it is just like, the kind of the MS and MD doctors, somebody is talking about the eye, somebody is talking about the heart, and somebody is talking about kidney and liver, but nobody is talking holistically. So that's the experience. I think if we can build upon this aspect, then the program can go further and move in the right direction. Because otherwise, people do not join. They say it's not useful for me. The forest department will not be going for Swachh Bharat or other things. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah, you had one, and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I am Sujata Hingorani. I'm from Oasis Designs Inc. We are consultants. We work with the government on public projects. We have worked on Smart City, Amrit, Hriday, as well as we work on ULBs. So I just want to bring out a point of view of what has kind of worked and not worked. For example, the Smart City area-based plan really worked, in which we could look at a lot of things holistically. At scale at certain cities. Like if we talk about climate mitigation, for example, stormwater management or solid waste management, even a simple thing like what Sir just said about the language, deconcretizing or using the open spaces for stormwater management. Those should come into the regular language of our, vocabulary, instead of just talking about climate change and, those words which are intangible, you can say.
So that's what I was saying. That's precisely the idea. What you're saying, that's precisely the idea.
We need those discussions with the, more panel discussions. The engineers are, in fact, looking at all the city development. So how to actually, train the engineers, as ma'am also said, create the checklist. We have to create SOPs also. That which are the
point taken. I think your point is taken. That's precisely what we are trying to work towards.
The idea of this whole program is to bring these issues on a conversation table. Once you get them on a conversation table, then you can the granularity of breaking it into those points where we start talking on the same platform and same language.
Ajit Kumar, founder Khushi working on sustainable development goals, integration basically at community levels. Basically, I wanted to add 2 points, 2 small points. Like, we need to look at more social and local leaders working on these goals, climate change and environment and biodiversity, and even land degradation and desertification that is happening at many places now. And as well as social and green enterprises in districts and even Mufassil or rural areas. Thank you.
Good. I think that's good. One last question. Okay.
Sure, sir.
Go ahead. I think that's working. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to add that we have LCCM has to see what you initially said, agglomeration level, and we have to link the things which are already happening. This 15th Finance Commission has came up with the approach on water and sanitation, not city, but a city region through urban agglomeration basis. And that covers village panchayat, census towns. So in that region, maybe LCCM should also cover the engineers which are dealing in the whole region. That is my one point. And another is there are other things like energy audit and environmental audit. This is provided in the model municipal law prepared by NIUA, but it is not implemented. So energy audit and environmental audit will pave a way for checklist, for SOPs, for assessment, to see how to move. Okay, and I would add that in the municipal budget itself, there is a need to add climate change actions, which are happening, like biomethanation, processing of coconut waste. Bangalore, 53% of waste, particularly the kitchen waste, is processed, and they are generating energy. Other cities also, coconut, they are generating pellets, which are...
The point taken. There are a lot of these things which will go into the design. We'll reach out to you as we get into that detailing exercise. But I think these are good, suggestions. But with that, let me, I'm sorry we are really running out of time. But thank you all for staying on for this long. Once again, thanks to the panel for joining us today. Fascinating discussions as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much.
As the event draws to a close, I invite Shri Naeem Keruwala to present a token of appreciation to the panelists today. Finally, I request Shri Hitesh Vaidya to share his concluding thoughts on the panel discussion.
Again, I think my job is much easier now because I have already said thank you. So I will not take much of and not stand in between the lunch and you. So I think I'll restrain myself giving a more sermon, but say thank you to all the panelists who have joined us. Thank you all the partners and all the professionals who have come from different places and joined us today. Please, NIUA will look forward to your guidance, direction, and technical support to move forward. This is a big issue, and we have to work hand in hand, and we have to also do the walk the talk rather than just only talk. So I look forward to your cooperation, and thank you. Please join us for lunch. Thank you.
Lunch is served outside.